Well, welcome. My name is John Morris, and I'm the former director of the Knight Alzheimer's Disease Research Center here at Washington University. And on behalf of the ADRC, we are delighted to welcome everyone here for the 19th annual Norman R. Seay Lecture. For those who didn't know Norman, who passed away in 2019, he was the inaugural chair of our Knight ADRC African American Advisory Board beginning in 2000 and very influential in helping us become more culturally aware and sensitive. Norman stepped down as chair of the African American Advisory Board in 2006, and that's when we decided to hold this annual lecture to honor him. Before we begin, there's several housekeeping issues. First, all devices please put on silent. Second, if anybody parked in the Metro or North Garage garages outside at the desk, you can get your parking ticket validated. For the necessary rooms, if you exit either of the exits and turn to your right at the end of that hallway. And finally, on your programs, there's a QR code. We would appreciate very much if you would use that to complete an evaluation of this Seay lecture so that we can continually grow it and improve it. Following the lecture, there will be a reception out in the lobby. And this is sponsored by one of our valued partners, the St. Louis, Missouri chapter of the Lynx Incorporated, and Kay Royster is the president of that chapter. So please join us after the lecture for a reception. I mentioned the critical role that the African American Advisory Board has played in the Knight ADRC and its diversity efforts, so I'm going to take a moment and maybe we can have the lights back on, and I'm going to ask all of the African American Advisory Board members who are here to stand up, please, so we can recognize them. To put on a program such as the Seay Lecture requires a lot of work from a lot of people, and the primary responsibility for organizing it is the Knight ADRC's Outreach, Recruitment, and Education Corps that is led by Andre Denny and Jessica Mazursky, and great contributions from Jennifer Phillips and Dottie McDowell. But one person, I think above all, has put her heart and soul into this, and that's Murtis Spencer. Is Murtis here, or is she outside? All right, okay, well, let's applaud her anyway, and we'll tell her we recognize her. Before we introduce our speaker, I'd like to introduce Dr. Cherie Wilson, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor and Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Washington University School of Medicine. Dr. Wilson received her doctoral degree in higher education administration from Indiana University and had several positions following her degree, including as Associate Dean for Cultural Affairs and Diversity at the University of Iowa College of Medicine. We were very fortunate to be able to recruit her here in 2018 to lead a new office on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And she's done a really wonderful job and been very helpful to the Knight ADRC. Her efforts have been just recently recognized because she received, on behalf of the School of Medicine, the Institutional Excellence Award from the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education. Will you join me in welcoming Dr. Wilson, who's going to provide some welcoming remarks. Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Morris, for the introduction and for the invitation to provide opening remarks for the 19th Norman Seay Lecture. I too am pleased to welcome you to the WashU Medicine campus, and I want to begin by recognizing the land on which Washington University School of Medicine is located. We are located on the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Osage, Miami, and Sioux peoples. And so I honor the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land. Without them, we would not have access to this session and to this dialogue. So I take this opportunity to thank and honor them as the original caretakers. I first had the opportunity to attend and provide remarks at the Norman Seay lecture in 2019. At that time, I had been in my position, as you heard, for just a little over a year. And because my position was new and the office that I now lead was newly established, there was much work to be done. One of our first tasks was to create a mission statement for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in support of the School of Medicine's mission. And while I will not share the entire statement, you can certainly view it in its entirety on our website, there is a key component that directly connects to Norman Seay's legacy as a civil rights leader. And that is that our office will direct, lead, and advance institutional efforts that create a welcoming, diverse, and inclusive environment where everyone who learns, trains, conducts research, teaches, works, and seeks care within Washington University School of Medicine is included, valued, and respected. We strive to accomplish and meet this mission in a number of different ways, including facilitating professional development and training on culturally responsive care, addressing implicit biases that may lead to disparities in healthcare, and our comprehensive Understanding Systemic Racism curriculum. We have also focused on increasing workforce diversity because we know that diverse teams are more effective, and that racial concordance between patients and healthcare professionals has been shown to improve patient outcomes, which can potentially reduce health inequities. Since 2017, we have also increased faculty from populations that have been historically underrepresented in medicine because we have a focus on increasing workforce diversity. And by doing that, we have, since 2017, increased faculty from underrepresented populations by over 80%. Women faculty have increased 46% during that time period. And additionally, while the number of faculty from underrepresented populations is still small, they were awarded nearly $160 million in research between 2018 and 2022. This is particularly important to mention because too often there is the assumption that if institutions increase workforce diversity, that excellence suffers. However, we adhere to one of the foundational principles of inclusive excellence, that diversity and excellence are not mutually exclusive, rather they drive each other. Today's keynote speaker, Dr. Robert Turner, exemplifies that principle, and I look forward to his lecture. I've highlighted a few of our accomplishments related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We still have much more work to do to reach that goal of creating a climate and culture that is welcoming, diverse, and inclusive. And despite attacks across the country to dismantle and/or eliminate DEI programs, at WashU Medicine, we remain resolute in our commitment to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
It's a real honor and a pleasure to introduce Robert W. Turner II. He leads national efforts to promote brain health in athletes and in Black men. He authored a book in 2018 about the National Football League. It's entitled NFL Means Not for Long, Life and Career of the NFL Athlete. Dr. Turner is funded by the National Institute of Neurologic Disease and Stroke to study the contribution of repetitive head impacts and social determinants of health regarding Alzheimer's disease-related dementias in older adult Black men. Dr. Turner received his Bachelor of Arts degree from James Madison University in 1984. I believe went to the university on an athletic scholarship, and subsequently played professional football for the United States Football League, Canadian Football League, and the San Francisco 49ers of the National Football League. He was a defensive back. He then decided to pursue his academic interests and got a doctoral degree in sociology in 2010 from the City University of New York, and had several academic positions until he joined George Washington University in 2018 as an assistant professor, and this year was appointed as associate professor at Duke University, his new academic home, where he will be co-leader of the Outreach, Recruitment, and Education Corps of the Duke and University of North Carolina, ADRC. He contributes his expertise to a number of other programs that study repetitive brain trauma, including the Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy Center at Boston University. We are very looking forward to his presentation today, as you can see the title. But before we have him take the podium, I'm going to ask Dr. Turner and Dr. Wilson to join me up here for a photograph. And if you'll come over here. We are going to give that to you. I'm going to button my jacket.
We tried to make matching jackets.
You two caught each other.
We'll move over this way a little bit. You're in the middle.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's welcome Dr. Turner to the podium.
All right. I'm going to set a timer, okay? Because I'm a preacher's son. And if I don't set that timer, y'all in trouble. But I also heard that, you know, there is reception and refreshments, and I'm not going to stand in the way of food and drink. So we're going to try to do that as quickly as we possibly can. All right, so I am all those things that they read over there, and I never realized that they're talking about me. I do know about the football part, but everything else, I forget all that stuff. But anyway, so instead of lecturing, I'm not a lecturer. I don't like to lecture. I have slides. I got a lot of slides, and we'll probably go through the slides. But I really am going to do this more, I hope, as a TED Talk type of a talk, at least in the beginning, right? Because I'm hoping that you invited me here so we could get real with one another. Can we do that? See, if we was in church, I'd say, can we get an amen? So let's get real, right? Because I had this wonderful talk today with Dr. Ballsbury and the Health Disparities Group, and I think it was the REC, is your REC or something? And you know, they wanted to understand how do we recruit people from underrepresented groups? And in particular, you know, my background, I study Black men primarily, not exclusively, but Black men. And they were like, how do we do this, right? And so I tried my hardest not to talk about how to recruit Black men and get them engaged in that conversation, so that way I would have something to talk to you about. But they really pushed me on that, so hopefully I'm not too redundant from them. But I told them the most important thing to do, and when we're talking about Black men, you'll see on the screen it says, Why should he participate? Think about that for a second. And we're going to go over this. But if you were talking to a black man and you were trying to get them involved in, brain health and aging research, ADR research, right? And we've all been trained, right? We've all gone to graduate school, or we're volunteering in the community and all of these things. And we're all so wrapped up and very close to the disease, and we understand all the reasons why we want someone to get involved and why we want them to get involved. But we need to step back and think about this for a moment. Why would any black man want to get involved with a research project? What benefit would it serve him? Right? I'm not asking you to answer the question, but I think it's really, really important when you're engaging with someone and given their lived experiences and what they've gone through, we've got to put ourselves in that person's position, or we've got to try our hardest to understand where they're coming from as to why would they want to do this. So essentially, that's what's going to undergird the whole conversation that I have for the rest of today. Right, so again, I'm going to take a culturally informed approach to engaging black men in brain health and aging research. My whole career, essentially, a large part of it is really about this, for many different ways to do this. But not exclusively. I work with athletes and I work with all kinds of populations, but truthfully, I care about the outcomes that they have. So the elephant in the room for me is that I do have an athletic background. I am probably the least likely person that should be standing in front of you. I went to school, and from the time I was in high school, and really the only thing I ever really wanted to do, and that was to play professional football. So I knew that for me, the way to get to the NFL was that you had to go to college. But I was the first generation person in my college, so I didn't know how to get to college. I didn't know anything about college. I just knew that that was the pathway that I had to follow. And so unfortunately, like very many other black men, and we're going to go through this, but when I was young, there was not a lot of interest in my school of helping us get to school. They were really directing you towards vocational school and all of these other things, right? But I just knew, they said, okay, you need to learn how to do English and math and science and some four regular thing, history, right? So I was like, okay, well, if that's what it takes to get into college, I'm going to do that for 4 years. So at least I'll have 4 years behind me. It can't keep me out. And so it actually kind of worked out for me. But fortunately, I went to a school. I had an opportunity to go to Penn State and play football there, but I chose to go to James Madison because the coach there had said, hey, and this is really important when you think about young black men, but he said, there's so many other places that may want you, but we need you. Right? And so for me, that affirmation, and I came from a household, my grandfather was around, my uncles were around, my dad was around, everything else. I didn't need any outside, validation. But that thing in sports, when they said, hey, we need you, that was music to an 18-year-old kid's heart and mind. And that's why I went. Right? And we talked about that today in terms of respect for a black man, a young black man, no matter what age, is really important. So that's why I went there. So the book was, I went to graduate school essentially, not because I was trying to get an academic career, not because I wanted to stand in front of you, not because I wanted to make contributions to science, but actually I just wanted to get smart. I felt like I really didn't do enough in my undergraduate years. And I said, okay, I was working full time. I said, I'm gonna go back to school. And I learned by reading online, they said, you can't do much with a master's in sociology. So I just made the very smart and unwise decision at the time. I said, okay, well, I'll get a PhD, right? And that's I'm working, and that was it, right? I had no idea, right? I didn't know it was gonna take the next 8 years of my life, but so it did. But through that, a question that had come up as I was doing this work, and it was trying to understand, myself included, why do so many men have a difficult time in their transition to life after sports, right? Because you gotta understand, I'm standing in front of you, all I ever wanted to do was play football. I didn't even know how to pick a major when I was in college. I didn't know. I really didn't know. I was in high school. It's a funny story, but there was we had a statistician for our basketball team, and she said, what is your GPA? And I was like, what? And I was like, I have one of those? She said, yeah, everybody has one. I was like, what are you talking about? I never heard of that before. And then she said, you got a cum too. That really blew my mind, right? So I had no idea. But you know, I went back because I really started to think about things, and I realized that as I was doing my work there, I started to see, particularly with black men, we're talking about some of the different struggles and the pathways that I had gone. I had one athlete say, you know, I struggled with depression my whole athletic career, and it seemed like nobody really cared because all they saw was this young black boy out there doing really well on the field, so he obviously must be doing well. Then I had another guy say, you know, I can't, like I'm dealing with depression, I'm going through a divorce, I got 4 kids. This guy went to Stanford University, he's winning a Super Bowl with a team, he is the man, and he's saying, I can't go to my coach and say I need a mental health day, right? So I'm like, how do these people, how do they really perform at such a high level? I knew I was not that good of an athlete. I was a good athlete, and some people might even say I was a great athlete, but I was certainly not good enough that if something was off mentally, that I could just put it to the side and keep going. But I was like, how do these guys do that? So that's what led me down this path, okay? So Drew, what I'm gonna talk about today, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the importance of integrating social determinants of health with a life course approach, those of you who are in academia, right, for conducting research to further our understanding of black men's health disparities. And the reason that's really important because, you know, lots of time we're like, we need to get them involved in all of these other things, and we know that health disparity is really important. But I'm arguing from my sociology days is that, you know, particularly from a social and behavioral health, you need to have a theoretical underpinning. You need to kind of understand. And what I'm going to argue today is that the life course framework, it emphasizes the implications of the social pathway trajectories by shaping, you know, kind of what happens, the natural forces and the institutions and how they play a role in shaping and understanding, you know, what black men they experience in America. So my work, we're going to talk about black men's health, but what we talked about today was there's one important overdriving question that even links to the question of why should a black man get involved with research? I always come from the standpoint and ask all the time, what does it mean to be a black man in America? Right? Because those of you who are not black men, this is a question that is always on the top of our mind in many different forms and fashions all the time. When I walk out of the doorway, what is on my black body? How do people see me? How do people engage with me? What's going to happen today? Do I have the armor on to deal with whatever might come up with me today? Right? And I don't know the answer to that for every black man. I can't tell you, and I'm not going to give you an answer to that for everyone. But I can guarantee you that if you want to know, and if he's thinking about why should he participate in a research question, is really, really strongly linked to what does it mean to be a black man in America. So I'll give you a step off, you know, track here for a minute, but I was out doing recruiting for my black men's caregiving study, where we're trying to understand what around stress related to caregiving, and how does that stress impact you physiologically, and how does it with cortisol levels, and how does it affect you neurocognitively? And I had a black man tell me, he was probably around 50, 60 years old, and he said to me, he said, you want to understand what it means to be, or what stress means for a black man? He goes, being black in America is stressful. As a man, that's stressful. So he was trying to tell me that every day of his life, he was thinking about his blackness in relationship to everything else that he was doing and any other encounters, engaging, right? So when you ask somebody to get involved with something, you have to understand about their lived experience, right? What are they going through? Where are they coming from? Why would they choose to take some time out of whatever is important to them in their hierarchy of things? Why would they take any time to want to engage with you? Right? That's really important. When we always talk about trust, we said this today, we got to gain their trust, we got to gain their trust. You don't even know what's important to them. Right? How do you ever know that you actually have their trust? right? But we do know that we have to, if anybody wants you to do something, they got to prove to you that they have their best interests in heart. That whatever it is that you're asking them to do, you understand where they're coming from. Believe me, if you want to work with black men, you better understand or try to take the time. You may not ever understand, but you're going to have to take the time, right, to think through those things. Where are they coming from? And so think about this. You've probably seen something about this before, right? But we talk about the disparities of health and aging among black men. It's all well known, and I'm not going to read through all of those, right? But I want you to think about this for a second. The CDC said just recently after COVID that the lifespan of a black man today is 67.7 years, right? So think about that for a second. Think about, what does that mean to you? If you were a black man, what would that mean to you, right? You're trying to say, how long am I going to live? How old am I, right? What does this mean? What does this mean for the people that I grew up with, right? What does this mean for my boys? Like, how many of them are still going to be around? How many of them have I lost, right? Think about this for a second. If whenever you hear about health outcomes in your life, hey, this is what's going on, #1 disease, heart killer, this, all of these things. Could you imagine what it's like, what it means to you psychologically if you're always at the bottom of those numbers? That's what it, in part, at least from a health perspective, what it means to be a black man in America, right? So it's from those perspectives that we have to understand what they're, some of the things. I can't tell you what everybody's thinking, but these are some of the things that they think about when it comes to health and participating in a health study, right? So this is another thing that I think is really important. I know I'm not getting through all of this, but I'm going to try to. But much of the research and scholarship on Black America has historically situated Black culture deficit model that attributes our disparities into the decisions that we make. Who we live, where we live, how we live, it's always somehow or another, it's a deficit model, right? I didn't put the slide up on this, but Du Bois really, he did a whole study that said, hey, listen, all of these things you attribute to black people, it's not pathology. This is the social conditions by which they find themselves in, right? So again, such a pathology, it overlooks the complex interactions between personal agency, I'm a sociology, so agency and structure, culture, the environment, all of these social determinants of health type of things that we're talking about, right? So what I'm arguing is that although there's several frameworks across numerous disciplines that can exist, that can be applied to our understanding of Black men's health, what I'm arguing for is a life course approach. In other words, what happens in certain areas and parts in your life at one place, they're going to have a cumulative effect over the time across the life course, right? And so this is why I argue that, when we're looking at social determinants of health, and you've all seen this upstream, downstream, so we don't have to go into that, but, we have to contextualize and understand their decisions as well as their health count. All of these things are part of the matrix, right? Pathways that impact, social factors, neighborhoods, working conditions, education, all of these different things. So I don't have to go through all of those for you, right? But essentially, life course is defined as the interdependent and variable sequences of statuses across life domains, education, family, work, health, leisure, across the lifespan, right? So again, I've kind of really the theoretical background, but seminal early life events, and this is really important when we think about what does it mean to be a Black man, and we think about the positionality, their lived experience. I think this is one of the most important things. Seminal early life events set individuals on a trajectory that build on later events to adversely affect life chances. And we'll go into that in a little bit. But these events can affect health through challenges that minoritized men face in trying to be successful in respectable aspects of their masculinity and manhood. And we talked about this a little bit earlier today, but respect is so important to Black men. On every level, it is so important. The one thing that they will talk about, young gangbangers, anybody else, he disrespected me. I'm not gonna let anybody disrespect me. My dad is 86 years old. My dad is teaching me at his age what it means to really grow old, as an older adult with respect and grace. That's just so deeply important to Black men. It's deeply, and they will demand that respect. And if they don't feel respected by you, they'll never get involved with your research. Okay, so again, utilizing the life course perspective as a conceptual lens, I really like to investigate Black males' experiences. It raises questions about the influence in my life, the way I really think about this. I'm a sociologist, but I'm imploring you from a really a theoretical kind of perspective, conceptual perspective. Think about the engagements and the interactions that men have with social institutions and the culture, right, on individual and group pathway trajectories, right? So my endorsement of the life course perspective heeds these concerns by integrating procedures and techniques that focus on the interplay of institutions, right? Timing, social link live, social historical events. So I'm really arguing, I'm really going to talk about today, and I really want you to think about, I say that there are 4 primary institutions that really have a major impact on how Black men experience the world. In America, at least, 1 is the education system, 2 is the criminal justice and judicial system, 3 is the military, and 4th is what I call the sports industrial complex. Let me check my time, make sure I'm not going too crazy over here. All right, because I'm trying to tell you. Oh, I got 26 minutes, we're good. All right. All right, so as you think about this from again, we talk about for Black men, within our society, we say, hey, listen, they got to fight to get here, right? Just to get here, they got to struggle, right? And they got to fight to stay here. And then what are all the fights all the way through, right? So think about this. What are early life experiences for young Black boys in the education system? What do you think it tells them? Right? Again, these institutions, I argue, they're important and they're significant in terms of the primacy for 2 primary reasons. You could probably think about, and people say, well, what about the church and all that? But there's 2 primary reasons that I say. And one is the significant over or underrepresentation of Black men's involvement in each of these institutions. And then the next one is the events that occur to Black men. Now, of course, when I'm talking Black men, I'm talking about young Black boys in the education system all the way through. Under the care, at one phase of their life, it has cascading consequences in other parts of their life. So, the education system. This is your first engagement outside. You walk out of your house and you're working and you're engaging as in pre-K. With institutions. What is the world messaging to you? What is the world telling you about your worth and your value? Right? What is the young Black boy's experience there? K through 12 system has an immediate and long-term impact on U.S. students of all socioeconomic, racial, and gender groups. However, all the research, much of it points that Black males are most often academically and socially marginalized, right? Think about this for a second. It's not my work, but other people have shown that Black boys are put in detention, sent to the principal's office at far greater rates. What do you think that tells them? It tells them right up front, you don't have control over your body. We're going to imprison your body, right up front. Right? An abundance of research underscores the educational shortcomings of Black men. But here's the thing that's most important, right? It's always talking about our young Black boys and where they fall short. But evidence also suggests that many young Black males are prepared to learn and excel as they enter kindergarten. It's not until they experience the institution that tells them we have no expectation of you, or very little expectation, right? So think about how that even plays with your health, right? When we say, hey, listen, we want to educate you about health. My experience is people don't want to educate me about anything, right? They want to institutionalize. So all of a sudden we're talking about education. Wait a minute, that brings me back to some really bad and harmful things that I may have experienced. Not everyone, but this is generally, we know that this stuff is happening. I didn't make this up. That's why we got the quotes there, right? But rather than characterize the black male educational experience in terms of poor academic performance and behavioral deficiencies, right? Again, that's the pejorative way we look at oftentimes the cultural inefficiencies or deficiencies. Life course approach offers researchers the flexibility to shift the focus to one that examines how black lives are structured and influenced by their location within the educational system. In other words, that's longhand for saying their lived experiences. Understand them, hear from them, engage with them, get to know them, right? Again, now we can move on to, now I have so many stories, I'm slowing these down a little bit, but let's talk about the military. I'm sure many of you, I grew up in a family, my grandfather was in the military, all of my uncles were in the military, right? We've got generation. Military played a very important role in black men's lives, for good and for bad, but it shapes our outcomes. It shapes their position in the world. It shapes their understanding in the world. We cannot, as an institution, discard the impact of the military on the black family and on black men, right? So again, starting in colonial times and continuing through present, blacks have aptly served in every U.S. conflict. That's important to think about, right? Because again, those are resources from our neighborhoods, our black men that leave our neighborhood and they go get into conflicts, right? And it says, for more than 200 years, millions of black men have either joined voluntarily or served through the military draft. And at the height of their participation in 1981, nearly 1 out of every 5 black men born between 57 and 62 served in the armed forces, which means that many of the men that we're asking to get into our studies, this is their experience, right? Or even if they didn't go, it's how it influenced their communities, their neighborhoods, it impacts some of the friends that they had. This is vital to understanding what their experience is and contextually understanding what it would mean if we asked them to get into a research project. Right? Okay, in addition to training soldiers to compete in the civilian job market, researchers have concluded that blacks veterans outperform non-black veterans in labor markets measures of success. So, again, without them putting any value on it, but black men have found the military in some way, forms, or fashion. It has really changed the trajectory of their lives, right? Again, we're not going to get political about that, but it has a real significant influence, and that's what I'm trying to get you to walk away from here, right? Blacks and other non-white soldiers appear to benefit from military service even greater than their white counterparts. And I took the slide out, but that's even in the face of when we knew when they came back home from World War II, we came from the Korean War, and sometimes when they came back from Vietnam, because of racist policies, they were not awarded, some people were not awarded or afforded the benefits that they were supposed to, but still, the military changed the trajectory of their life. My dad is a person now in 1958. He got out of high school, was in Newark, New Jersey, and said, it's not going anywhere. I'm going to go to the military, right? And stayed in there for a number of years, right? So that is a real thing about how their lived experiences are from that, right? So a handful of contemporary and historical accounts indicate that large number of black American veterans were granted life-limited access to college as a result of de facto segregation in education system. Here we go back into even well after I was in a young 5 years old to 18 years old. Now I go to the military and I'm thinking, okay, I've served my country. It's going to give me a different opportunity. But then boom, right back into the education system, they have told me that you're not worthy of being educated. right? These are things that happen a lifelong. And then we say to them, hey, we want to get you involved. And one of the benefits of being in a research project is we're going to educate you about this thing. Very important for us to understand that. U.S. military is important, and I'm just arguing, the U.S. military is an important social institution that impacts, as we know, my dad's a veteran. He's got veteran benefits, the VA, so it affects their health, their labor, economics, and other outcomes across their life course. All right, so now let's go to the criminal justice system. I don't really think I have to do a lot of work here to convince you of the importance of, or the influence of the criminal justice system on black men's lives and how they experience America, how they experience the world, right? But let's just go through this, right? Because I think some of this is kind of striking, even though you've known it, I just want to remind you. Steady growth of the criminal justice system has become so pervasive in the lives of black males in poor neighborhoods that researchers view mass incarceration as a common reality in the early lives of this group. All right, the ubiquitous mass incarceration among young black males is closely linked with other large-scale social forces such as deindustrialization, failing schools, and joblessness. These are all within the context. And again, I'm not trying to say that every black male in America is laden with this, but I am trying to tell you that this is a real lived experience, a real lived reality, and this is the social conditions by which men are making a decision and thinking about the offer or rejecting the offer to participate in a research project, right? So always back to those two questions. What does it mean to be a black man in America, and what's in it for me? Why should I get involved? This is how I'm really imploring you I'm really saying, hey, as we think about our recs, our org, as we think about engagement, as we think about building relationships, you have to understand that these are the things that really situate and rooted in with how these men are thinking about trying to figure out, who are you? Why should I engage with you? I don't know you. Do you know me? Okay? Black men receive harsher sentences and greater odds of imprisonment compared to younger white men. We were having lunch today and we were talking about all the situations that happen here in this area, right? It's really surprised me in a lot of different ways, right? But, you know, what I was told is to be a black man and have your name put into the judicial system or the criminal justice system, that is a mark against you around this area that is going to be really hard for you to dig yourself from out of, right? You know, that's just, and I was like, the things that I heard today without going through, I was like, that's happening right now. And they're like, yes, we need to do everything we can to keep them out of that system, because once they're in that system, they got hell to pay, right? So imagine, maybe it didn't happen to me, but it happened to my brother. Maybe it didn't happen to me, but it happened to my dad. Maybe it happened to my son, right? These are institutions, by the way, I want you to think about it from this perspective. These are institutions that when we were kids were taught that they're there to protect you. They're there to enhance the quality of your life. But what I'm suggesting is in many instances, they're threats to your survival. Right? So in 2000 to 2006, the number of black men sentenced to prison increased by an estimate from these numbers there. And by the end of that period, blacks represented the largest group, 38% of male inmates across the country. Right? Again, these are some of the men today that we want them to get in. And they're saying, hey, you know what? Allow us to engage with you. The first thing they're saying is, I don't know you. I don't know the organization that you work for. I don't know if you care and have my best interests in heart, right? Okay, and this is the last thing that I'll say on this one, and I've got to wrap up here. I think my things can go in a minute so we can have questions. Pettit and Western, two sociologists at the time they were at Princeton, they concluded that imprisonment now rivals or overshadows the frequency of military service and college graduation for recent black cohorts. right? And with that in mind, the last thing I'll say on that topic is we know that when we do get black men or other black folks that are in these studies, they're the overeducated. They're the minority group here that has gone to college and been educated. We're not reaching all of those other people. And the reason that I'm giving this talk today is because all of those other people are the most important ones we need to understand contextually from a life course perspective how these institutions have treated them. All right, and then the last thing I'll do is I'll do this real quick, right? But sports, that's my last institution I talked about, but sports is a prominent institution that impacts the lives of black men for a number of different reasons. One of the most important but overlooked one is that, you know what? We expect black men to be physically superior and athletically superior, right? And so we expect them to go out there and dominate on the court, on the court and in football, right? But what we don't understand is what would put them there in the first place. Why would they be, I used to think that I played football because I loved the game. And fortunately, I did love the game and I was very good at it. But you know what? Growing up, when my parents moved me from Newark, New Jersey, inner city Newark, New Jersey, which was well over predominantly black, and we moved to a predominantly white neighborhood. And again, I was put into special need courses and all of these other things. And it was very clear to me early on when I arrived there that there were no expectations academically from me. So therefore, the place that I did excel, I was better than everybody else, that I got the most, love from everybody, was on a football field. So is there any wonder? It took me years later when I got my PhD to realize that was the case, but is there any wonder that happened? Right? So again, this is why we go, but how we again think about these things and what messages we give these men all are part of why should they get involved. All right? But again, I'm not going to go into this. I'll just say this real quickly. But a large number of young black males playing football and basketball on major college levels helps reinforce the notion that black bodies are athletic chattel for generating large cash. Look at that number that's in bold, 2.8. There's 60% of black men in basketball and football, but yet we only represent, of predominantly white institutions, we only represent 2.8% of the people in the population there. So that's a significant overrepresentation. We've been told we are valued again athletically, but not so much on those institutions academically and what we can provide there. All right, so I'm just gonna roll right through. We talked a little bit. So this framing, this understanding, and my approach, I apply it to my Black Men's Caregiver Research Project. I'm really understanding and try to do everything that I possibly can to listen, engage, and understand from their perspective, and try to come up with reasons why they would want to say yes to my study and why they would want to stay in the study. Same thing, this is the largest study that's ever been funded by NINDS and NIA, 200 black men, $6.5 million that we're using to try to understand the contributions of repetitive head impacts and social determinants of health on the Alzheimer's disease and related dementias of older black men, 50 years and older, taking this life course approach. Right, we have an emerging scholars program that I do because we really believe that it's very, very important in order to do this work. We know for sure that people feel most comfortable engaging with people who look like them and who have experiences like them. So we are trying to teach people how to engage from a culturally informed perspective, how to engage with black men, right? And then I have a Black Men's Brain Health Conference that we do annually. We do it during the Super Bowl in partnership with the NFL, the Alzheimer's Association is listed up there. We have NIA. We always have an academic host institution, right? And then within that conference, we have the Emerging Scholars, and we also have a Brain Health Directory or a registry. And then the last thing I will say, for me, the reason that I do my work is because I'm really important to me. That's my dad. And leaving a caring legacy for black men. And the reason that I hope they get involved is because they recognize that I really do care and I'm in it for the long haul. So with that, I'm gonna thank you and open it up for questions. Turn off my phone. We got 15 minutes for questions or so, right? So hopefully people will be able to ask. All right. Please step to the mic. I could be the host and MC the whole bit, you know.
Good afternoon, everybody. My first question is,
Tell us your name, brother.
Oh, sorry. My name is Mario Millsap, and I'm an occupational therapist. And so some of the conversations that I've been involved with is understanding the importance of this outreach work. Can you talk to me about like, what your very first step is before, like, are you just showing up to places and just like being presently felt, like trying to get a feel for the vibe, or like, are you doing more intentional outreach to try and get people to solicit these thoughts and opinions?
It's kind of, the answer to that question is a little challenging because I've been doing this work for a while now, and so I've built a reputation. People know me, and I get invited and those kinds of things. But I do have an outreach coordinator on my research lab, and I had to teach him kind of do this. So I'll take it from that perspective. What I did in the beginning with him is I just had him just tag along and just watch and just observe and just listen. And I really challenged him to take his personal experiences and think about what he has been observing and hearing and situated within those experiences. So I'll give you an example of what I mean about that, right? So we talked about this a little bit earlier today. You know, I have the benefit of, and I suffer from the privilege of being overly educated. A PhD, right? I've been trained by all of this stuff. So I have a way of thinking about Alzheimer's disease research. I have a way of thinking about the importance of why I want somebody to be in this research project, right? But what I also understand is I got a lot of family members that don't have these same kind of privileges that I have, that are still back living in Newark, New Jersey, and they're living their lives, and they're dealing with everything that they deal with, right? And so I start to think about, if I were to go to my cousin and I said, hey man, I really want you to get in this study, what do I need to know about him? What do I need to think about? How can I reflect on him? What would I need to hear from him? What would he think? What was the language that I would use, right? If I said, hey, I want you to get into a caregiver study, I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Study? I'm not sure I'm feeling that study thing, right? So one time I went out to DC, and we were at a health fair, and a sister came up to me and she said, I am completely into what you're talking about, supported in everything. She said, but you got to get rid of this word study. She said, because black folks ain't getting into no study. And I said, well, what should I do? She said, call it a project. You want them to get involved with this project. And it's an ongoing project. You want to build a relationship and get ongoing with them, right? So one of the answers is I got to take myself out of the position that I live in and that I'm working in on a daily basis, right? Especially if I'm trying to recruit people from across socio-different backgrounds and everything else. And I got to understand, I got to try my hardest. And I also have to just put an ear to the ground and say, yo, can we chat? Can we talk? What's going on? Right? I cannot be that educated brother from the other side of town. Sometimes I can be. Right? And sometimes those are the hardest people for me to talk to as well. They'd be like, they're educated and be like, no, I'm not trying to fall for that. I hear what you're saying. I believe you, but I'm not going that route. Right? So all I'm saying is the most important thing is really try not to look at things from your positionality. Try to be available for someone else's positionality, and then just listen. Spend time listening. And as long as they invite you to be in their presence, you're in the game. When they tell you, no, don't come around here no more, then you're done.
Can I cheat and ask another one real quick? Given your reputation and where you've been at right now, is there one thing you would tell yourself at the very beginning? Like, if you can go back in time and tell yourself like one thing, what would it be?
Well, I try to do that every day. I try to do that with everything that I do, right? Because again, right, I just think, I've been very fortunate. I've been on television talking about this stuff. I've been on Tamara Hall. I did a movie with LeBron James. I've done a whole bunch of other things. But you know what? When we talk about these other things that I've mentioned here, that doesn't matter to folks where they live. A lot of things, I will say this because I work with a lot of football players, and a lot of football players that have played in the NFL and in college and everything, they look up to me because they're like, listen, you epitomize what it is we want people to know about black men. Because people think that all we are, just if y'all remember, I forget the name, Laura something or whatever, she told LeBron to shut up and dribble. Right? The most successful basketball player in our day, right? She was like, we don't want to hear from you politically. We don't know nothing how to do. Just play ball and we're good, right? And my boys, when I talk to them and I talk to the athletes, they're like, hey, you know what? You show us what's possible. So I really appreciate that position, right? And it's really that they're opening up to me and I try to open up to them. So I think, again, going back to your question, the most important thing is don't come in with, your preconceived understandings of how things are. Just be present and talk to them and let them talk to you. And then y'all build a relationship over time. And hopefully through that, they might decide that they want to get involved. They might not decide to get involved, but they will help educate you on that population.
Appreciate you.
Okay, we have about 3 more questions. Dr. Washington?
Thank you, Dr. Turner, for sharing your research with us. I know you have close connections to the NFL and other football connections through your work. Can you go into what have been some of your other key community relationships to drive this important work within at Duke, at George Washington, and how that's changed and served as a foundation of what you do?
I appreciate you asking that question. For me, I think what's most important that I would say here in this conversation, and I really truly believe this, is that there is no black men's brain health and aging, or there's no black men's health unless there's black women. So they become a very key advocate in the whole thing, right? Because in many instances, I tell them, we talk about this all the time. I give you an example of why I say this. I was at Eastern Michigan University giving a talk on a panel. We had about 6 or 7 Detroit Lions that were there. And one of the guys said, you know what? He said, man, I was thinking about, I hadn't been to the dentist in about 5 years. He said, it was like when I finished playing football, I was like, I haven't been to the dentist. He said, so I turned around to my wife and I said, babe, how come I ain't been to the dentist? She said, you're a grown man. But it's a really important thing to think about for a second. It's a really important thing to think about. Because especially as athletes, right? Especially the higher up in the ranks that you go, the more that you get coddled, the more that people do things for you. But it's not just them, because if you think about it, little boys are taught in the beginning that their moms are the ones that manage their health. Their moms make the schedule. They take them to go see the doctor. Whenever there's anything wrong, mom makes sure they got the medications and all that other stuff. And we've given, by and large, now maybe today's changed. I don't have kids, so I don't know. But by and large, we're taught that the women in our lives are responsible for making sure our health is good, right? And so that has long-term ramifications on it as well. Right? So someone said earlier today, they said, hey, a black man's, they asked him, why did you sign up for this study? He said, because my wife told me to. Right? And I said, you know what? That man is saying, like in terms of what does it mean to be a black man in America, what he was saying, he says, I love my wife enough. I respect her enough that she wants nothing but good for me, so I'm going to do what she tells me to do. Right? That's what he was saying. Okay. So that I think is a really important, advocate to be when we think about our community.
Yes, hello. Oh, this works. Dr. Turner, hi. Thank you for your talk. My name is Alex Carter. I'm one of the neurologists here, and I wanted to get your opinion about something that really concerns me, which is there are more black men playing football now than ever, and on the surface, that sounds like a great thing. I remember sitting on the couch on Sundays with my dad watching football, and we would talk about how in college, there'd be a bunch of black quarterbacks, but when you got to the NFL, you never saw a black quarterback back then, because the quarterback position, that was the thinking person's position. And fortunately, things have changed, right? That's great. I think now we have the representation of African Americans in football is 53%. I didn't know that number. I had to look it up while you were talking.
That was just college. It's higher in the NFL, but yes.
Okay.
Much higher.
And but that's happening at the same time that over the last couple of decades, we've come to really appreciate the dangers associated with these repetitive head injuries. And I think that we can generally agree that in America, if something is good, African Americans have less of it. And if something is bad, African Americans have more of it. My concern is that as more African Americans are getting into football and are being overrepresented, how is the NFL's concern and focus on the dangers of these repetitive head injuries likely to change? Because we know that there's institutionalized racism, we know that there's all these baked-in biases, we know that black bodies are less valued. So what do you think that is likely to mean? Or do you think that this will help actually bring more focus on to the health of black brains?
I appreciate that question. I think we ought to have a whole nother lecture series around that because, and I'm being honest, I think because there's so much there to unpack. But I'm going to take it in just a couple different ways. I'm going to say this. One, I'm not sure evidence exists that there are more black men playing football today than there were before. I think I'm just using those numbers to highlight, kind of in the institutions that they're in. But you got to remember, black men have been playing football a long time. For a matter of fact, HBCUs were the biggest, pathway into the NFL. So lots of black men have been playing that all the time. But I think your point is well taken in terms of the risk of playing football and what does that mean to black men, black bodies, black communities. I think that's really important, right? And so my perspective is, we know that black men are going to play football. We know that, right? So I feel as though we need to make the game safer, and that's one of the things that I really try to do is put a lot of pressure on the institution to make it safer, but I also try to educate the men themselves during that, and I deal with older men, so I particularly deal with them as they transition across the life course. But I think, like you talked about, education is key, making resources available for them, dealing with the whole family as a whole. So I agree with you wholeheartedly that we are at a greater risk because of lack of resources and all these other things. But I recognize that as long as they live within a system that we do, right, people are giving them to go scholarships to go play football. I don't know if you know who Chad Ochocinco is, right? He played in the NFL. He said, let me tell you something. He said, if all of a sudden they started giving full scholarships to start to be a swimmer in college, he goes, you see a whole bunch of black men jumping in the pool. Right? So black men are making choices based on the opportunity structures that are in front of them. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anema Orikari. I'm a physician scientist in the radiology department at WashU, and thank you for your talk. It was it affirmed a lot of the feelings that I had growing up. From a young age, often told that you're not going to amount to much, or you're going to be a statistic, or look to the left, look to the right. One of you guys is going to go to prison or something like that. So it seems like from at least an academic standpoint, we've always came from a place of a deficit, as you mentioned. Is there a benefit to studying black men in terms of, serendipity, or, the black men that were in the right place at the right time to get to the next level and see how we can recreate that systematically? Do you think there's value in that, or do you think that's just like, too much of a pipe dream?
See, I think that that's a beautiful question, and I thank you for asking that question. If you notice, my conference is called the Black Men's Brain Health Conference, right? We do brain health and aging. A brother by the name of Beasley Reese, who played in the NFL for a number of years for the New York Giants, Cowboys, he said to me, he said, Doc, he said, because we were looking at mental health for a while, and he said, Doc, is there anything good that's happening with black men in terms of their brains? He said, because all we ever hear is the negative things going on, right? And I thought, you know, you're right. I said, so really what we wanted to look at are the risk and the protective factors. We know that black men are doing something right. Some black men are doing something right. Some black men live well in their lives well into their 80s and 90s and don't have brain problems. There are some black men that have played football and they're doing quite well later on in their lives. So we need to understand what are the risk factors. We need to understand what the protective factors. We need to understand, given all of these different variables that are there, how do we give black men hope? And how can they, instead of giving them hope, how can we learn from this that we can share the things that are going well with other people? So I really appreciate the way you put the question, but it is very vitally important. We can never, again, just be left with the message that there is no hope for us. We do amazing things in this country, and we need to be recognized for that, and we need to help other people put in a position that they can do amazing things.
Thank you. We're going to take 2 more questions, one of which is in the chat, and it reads, my uncle played football in the NFL and passed away from Alzheimer's disease in 2021. Do you feel the NFL is doing better at supporting players after their careers have ended and providing resources for concerns players may have about their brain health?
Oh man, these loaded questions. So again, the NFL is a business, and they're in the business of making money. They're also in the business of controlling the narrative as much as they possibly can, right? So one of the things that I always really like to highlight is that you saw the NFL put $100 million or something like that, $1 billion or something like that, that they could make payoffs in a concussion settlement over 20 years, right? But then what did we see? They baked into the settlement, they did race normings. Right? So essentially, those race normings meant that large swaths of men were not getting paid out that were black, but white guys were getting paid out. Now, that in of itself doesn't shock us, right? That's what the NFL does. That's historically what's been happening. But another thing that I do want people to understand, and I think this is very, very important, is that the reason that NFL got exposed and they made the change is they had 5,000 signatures from the NFL community, the football players and everything else. But that charge was by and large led by the white wives of the men in the NFL, right? And again, think about the messaging that suggests. We had this reach out. These black guys are married to these white women. They had to save us so that way we could gain the respect that we need, right? So I have no illusions about what the NFL prioritizes, none whatsoever. But at the same time, the NFL Players Association is put in a position for collective bargaining to represent the best interests of the athletes. And so I think that the work that I do and I try to do with others that are collectively trying to do, like he just talked about, is hopefully with this information, they are in a better position to bargain for the resources that they need that's going to, if they find themselves in a certain way later in their lives. What I mentioned earlier, where I'm actually surprised in our country, is really where we give the pass. Everybody looks at the NFL, but really where we give the pass is college football. We don't ask any of these questions about college football. We really don't. But who's protecting the best interests of the college football players? What I get all the time, and one of the reasons I can get so many people, black men, as well as white guys, into my studies for my football, is they say, you know what, Doc? We play football, we have these risks, but we don't have the benefit of a union, players association, and negotiated resources. We're just basically on our own. We played too. We had all this exposure, and if we don't have insurance or we don't have good enough insurance, there's not one person we can turn to help answer any of our questions. So that's one of the reasons, the answer, like the brother asked earlier, is that why I do the work that I do, because really trying to understand the vulnerabilities and trying to understand what are people doing right, what are people doing wrong, how can we, again, help them get the resources that they need through our research.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Turner, for your insightful lecture. I have a question, and it's more sort of, I'm seeking for your suggestion and opinion on this. So we have been talking a lot about trust, presence, and implicit bias. My name is Ram Singh. I'm a postdoc research associate in Department of Neurology under Dr. Babulal. And I have been going out in community from a long time and doing outreach with Mario and other few folks. So I understand, like, we need to learn the culture. We have to be culturally oriented and aware and conscious about the norms and things going on among the Black community. And the one thing which I have been seeing from quite a long time is high dropout of participants and attrition, Black men. We were able to create the initial contact, maintain the trust, even though we witnessed closed heart, closed doors, we didn't give up, we showed up. The one thing I learned that we need to show up. We did. We got people. They were there for the study, 6 months, 1 year. And then I encountered implicit bias. This implicit bias is coming from their own, a sense of not feeling belonged in the study, even though the entire research team is Black. We did our best. I have to counsel them, request them, make them understand, and address their bias or concern or question. But I meet dead end. So I just wanted to know, or take your suggestion, how to deal with that situation. Another situation is, we approach a lot of Black leaders in the community. They give us hope and promises that, okay, you can come, do the outreach. They even lead the folks to sign up for the, for the participation or the screening. But when we reach out for further follow-up or to develop a relationship, we don't hear back. And this is not just one time. We see it many times. And I'm lost. I don't know how to move ahead or approach. And there are many young researchers from different ethnicity, different color, who wants to help Black community. And I feel I live in a philosophy that each one help one. It's not just falls on the shoulder of Black community to help Black community. It falls on the shoulder of every one of us. So I just wanted to take suggestion from you, how to deal with this. I'm sorry about too many fragments in one.
That's
thinking and trying to, make one question.
So Rob, what do we do if we don't have a Robert Turner?
Is that the summary of that question? Okay. It's a good thing you said that, because I was going in a whole different direction. Okay, I'm going to tell you what you do. First of all, you didn't hear me at all use the word trust at all. You didn't hear me use that. Because I don't come from this perspective. Everybody talks about, well, they don't trust you because of Tuskegee, they don't trust you because of Henrietta Lack, all of these other different things, right? There's a heck of a lot of reasons they don't trust you. And it's not just you. But the reason that I don't focus on trust is because my question is, how do you know if you've ever gained trust? Like, we're scientists. We're supposed to measure things. We're supposed to have empirical. We're supposed to be led by data. How do we know we've gained trust? Does trust mean because they signed up and participated in the study? Is that the measure we use for trust? That doesn't mean that they trust you. That meant that they signed up for a study, right? We don't know whether they're going to come back again, right? But I do know this, that unless you build a relationship with them, you're never going to be able to sustain them being in a study, right? And that's really what I'm trying to focus on. Let's not think about trust as much as relationships, right? I talked about this earlier. Peggy Dilworth Anderson talks about there are primary, for the black community, there's primary two drivers in terms of people making decisions whether they want to be involved in a study or not. One of is what is your relationship or affinity to the disease? You know, if your dad had cancer, and then you want to be in a prostate cancer study. But the second one is that they ask, do I know this organization? What do I know about you? And they can't know anything about you unless you spend time with them, unless they get to know you, right? Because this goes back to respect that we were talking about before. It makes sense when you told me, hey, listen, a black leader in an organization would say to you, hey, listen, I want you to go get all involved with this study. But still, just because he has endorsed it, that doesn't mean that I have been convinced that I know you, that I feel comfortable being engaged with you, right? You gotta show me that you're gonna be here for a while. That like, not only are you gonna get this benefit, not only are you gonna give me this education, whatever, right? But did you take the time to get to know who I am, what's important to me, right? That's the problem with doing community-driven, cultural-driven work. It takes a heck of a lot of time. But truthfully, that problem turns into a real joy and a benefit when you put that out there. In my work, what I'm really trying to do, we haven't talked about this at all, but what I'm really trying to do is FUBU work for us, by us, right? I want to be able to have these relationships where ultimately these men, because my communities, remember, are not just geographically bound. I deal with black men, right? So I deal with black men all over the country, and I deal with football players all over the country. But if I can get to know them over time and understand what's important to them, maybe we can design projects together, right? So I don't need a community board. What I need is them to be intimately involved and want to drive the relationship. And I'm not suggesting that community boards or anything else are bad. What I am suggesting is, even though you may not be Robert Turner and look like coming from them, but if they can understand that, you know what, you care about them, you're in this to really engage with this, then you have a much better opportunity to win in the long haul. Here we go. So I thank you much for having me.